Okay, so the last week was all about marketing segmentation, and we're looking today at how to actually target people in different segments. So it's very hard to separate these topics of segmentation, targeting, positioning. So there's going to be a lot of overlap between topics, which is why I've kind of assigned two of them for 1 week because they're quite small and they're pretty much, there is the same thing. There is a lot of overlap there. So let's just start off with a little example. Um, we want to, this leads on from marketing segmentation, where maybe Nintendo, we need to decide which segments to actually pursue. We can't really be the leader in every single segment of the market. So I can imagine there's a family segment here. We've got our youth and teen gamers, and I've got kind of my gaming nerds here. Apologies for the reference there. And which of these segments do we want to go for? So traditionally, we've been strong in the family segment, but these other segments are maybe quite high value segments. We're maybe not doing quite so well as PlayStation or Xbox in these particular segments. So it's a case of, we don't want to try and get a mediocre product aimed at all three segments that doesn't particularly appeal to any segment because then we'll just get crushed in the market. So do we continue with the family segment, or do we really try to expand to these kind of high value male teen gamers, adult people who game all the time sort of segments? And I think Nintendo has been doing that. They have more with the last generation. They've had more adult oriented games, maybe more shoot 'em ups, maybe games with a little bit more violence. So they have, they still have their kind of iconic family properties, but they have expanded a little bit. So we obviously want a segment to be profitable. Imagine if I had a segment of people who like very obscure British puzzle games. That might not be a particularly profitable segment for me. So I want to look at, how many people are in the segment, how much money I can make at them, off them, and whether this segment is going to be growing or, you know, getting kind of smaller over time. How big's the market going to be over time? Um, you know, the GPS, like the Garmin's and the TomToms, the GPS, this was a fast growing segment in the early 2000s as people worked out it was more convenient than maps. But as soon as smartphones came along, this segment started to kind of, um, you know, decrease in value as more and more people use smartphones for navigation. And also, our fit with the segment. Nintendo is known, one of its strengths is it's known, families can sit their kids in front of a Nintendo and play Mario and they feel their kids are going to be safe. If we start having incredibly violent games or sexual games, this might hurt our brand image in some of our core offerings and segments. So this might not be particularly a good idea. So here's this. This is from the book. This is just a little, strategic criteria for targeting different segments. So if the market is attractive and goes to our strengths, then we go for it. If it's a bad market and we're not very strong in that area, we avoid. And there's also two segments where it plays to our strengths but isn't great, and attractive, but we're not so good in this area. So, feel free to disagree. I actually had to think quite a little bit about this because obviously I'm not a gamer. Some of you may have a little bit more insight into some of these segments. So we know that Nintendo does well in the family segment. It's an attractive segment. If you consider Nintendo's business to be global, it's going to be growing as increasingly large middle class in the world, and it's a strength for us. So it would make sense for us to continue with this segment. Um, Something Nintendo's done well on is like the Wii and the activity segment. And I always thought that was weird. That was like the next biggest thing for like about 10 years ago, with people all having these consoles where they did sports on their consoles. But at the moment, it never really, as a mature market, it never really materialized. There wasn't huge growth in this segment. I think it's maybe as people want to do their exercise outside and with friends, particularly after COVID. So it's never not really been a segment that's taken off. So we've got experience in this segment. We could probably port some of our older games over, but it's not that hot. It's certainly something to consider if we see new technologies, new VR technologies are going to make this segment more attractive. It's something we could look at. And then the market is attractive but less capable. Serious gamers focused on technology and graphics. There's arguments to be made both ways. We, Nintendo need to at least try to keep up technologically with Sony and Microsoft. Otherwise, they may lose some of the family segment if Microsoft can say, "Hey, we've got a much better console, and now we've got these wonderful family-friendly games." But it may be, Microsoft and Sony are two of the world's biggest corporations. It may be that we can never quite get ahead in creating these kind of incredibly high-tech immersive experiences. So it may be the amount of money we have to invest to be better than Microsoft or be better than Sony. It might be better off developing new properties for our family segment. And this one was the one I struggled a little bit. So market doesn't look so hot and we're less capable. I actually put mobile gaming because I saw some statistics. If you just click through this, because I thought mobile gaming was obviously a huge thing, but apparently the last year, mobile gaming has decreased a little bit year on year. Again, maybe people are looking to get away from continuously looking at games on their cell phone. And Nintendo is actually quite capable on handhelds, but I don't think they've ever really gone into the mobile gaming realm, so it's good. But again, it's maybe not doing so well, but it's still a big market, and you could argue that Nintendo could probably at least make some money licensing Mario and licensing some of their names to this segment. But this was the hardest for me to prepare to the slides. I was going to think, gaming as a whole is growing, which segment is maybe not growing at the moment. So that's what I came up on, but feel free to disagree with that one. Okay, so this is the discussion I gave in the last slide. The serious gamers, more out games focused to Switch, but a little bit behind Xbox. And the fact we have this kind of safe, family-friendly image may not help us with like male teenage gamers. With the activity segment, we have this history of serving the segment, but it never really, never really became mass market with all consoles having kind of the Wii attachments. And that my thoughts were that, after COVID, people really do want to get out into the nature when they're exercising, rather than kind of sitting at a computer screen. Okay, so this is what we did in the practical last class. There's people have critiqued this as not being particularly realistic, the SWOT analysis. But a good SWOT analysis just is, I wouldn't base, my whole company strategy on a SWOT analysis, but it does enable you to start thinking seriously about a particular problem. So the SWOT analysis, we have our internal, this is our company's strengths and weakness, and this is focused on us, our corporation, so Nintendo, and the external environment. So this would be, our competitors, what's going on in the world, and we've got opportunities and we have threats. So the strengths and weaknesses, we really need to research our own company. What are we good at? We need to take a critical look at what we're good at and maybe what we're not so good at. And so my thing for the Nintendo is we've got these iconic brands. We've got to strengthen the family segment. We also, Nintendo are very strong in certain countries, particularly Japan. And what our weaknesses, we have one of the things is I don't think Nintendo is quite as strong in online gaming. They don't quite have the infrastructure that Sony or Xbox have. And as games, people are playing them in groups as a social experience, and games increasingly going online. This is maybe an issue that we have this limited infrastructure. And generally, our technology is just not quite, the Switch was very innovative, but we don't have quite as powerful consoles as our competitors. And we have less games for really serious high-end gamers. Now, we can also now think about, once we've done the strengths and weaknesses, about the opportunities and threats. And these could kind of be, driven by changes in what we talked about in the first week in the 5C. So let's just have an example. The ease of internet access. And for us, most people have internet now, but let's just say there's an increased global online gaming potential. That's obviously going to affect the market. Growing Hispanic population in the US. There's needs for a more diverse population and multi-language offerings. New competitors in this industry, I would say new competitors and new consoles, but there's very high barriers to entry. New offerings from existing competitors, i.e. the PlayStation, next generation PlayStation and Xbox. And I put the return of the PC. I noticed that more and more games are getting ported to PC. When I was young, the PC gaming was a thing, and then the consoles kind of took it over. And it's almost like people are liking this idea of having this platform where you can do other things, you can do business, but also you can play games. I wouldn't say there's a lack of competitors. And then demographics. The example the book gives aging baby boomers. And then I put here, maybe can we appeal to this segment, maybe health, wellness, puzzle games for this particular segment. So this is our final SWOT analysis. So our opportunities, Switch could help Nintendo break into the next generation, more serious gaming segments, global growth in family purchasing power, which we can really push our international expansion throughout the world. And potential threats, if Sony and Microsoft make a strong push into the family marketing with new, family-focused intellectual property, and Nintendo may fall further behind in terms of our technology relative to the two leading consoles. Okay. So the last little thing in this section is and this is kind of overlaps. I did because I'm very big into perceptual maps, so I did a little bit more last week. But as I mentioned when we did segmentation last week, you can segment customers, you can show customers on a map, you can put customers into groups, but you can also do that with firms and brands. And this is kind of the focus here, where we're kind of looking at where firms are positioned relative to one another. So this is the generic example from the book, where we have like 2 dimensions. So this is a little bit like the example I gave in class, where we had the fashion brands on the board, and I had trendiness and quality, but here we have quality and price, which should actually be highly correlated. And it's where do we fit relative to our competitors? Quite often, if we're developing a new product or a new kind of store concept, then we would plot our competitors and say, hey, where do we want to be on this particular map? So this was the one I showed you last class. This is kind of business intelligence packages, and it's just showing we've got how complete our vision is, what proportion of the market do we cover, and how we're actually able to how can we practically execute that strategy. And you see Microsoft is up here in the lead. Salesforce is doing pretty well. So we have this segment of leaders. We have this segment of people who've got great vision but can't quite execute. And we have this segment of people who don't have great vision, but they do execute, like Amazon Web Services, Google. And then we have this segment of people who are companies who are doing things quite poorly. Another very simple perceptual map. This is kind of a perceptual map of cheap restaurants, and we're going from fast food to sit down. This is just a slightly silly stereotyped one, but you've got the kind of the sit down concepts such as Olive Garden, Cheesecake Factory, IHOP. By the B's upside down. We got Shake and Steak. We got Chili's. And I'm not sure I would agree that Chipotle is particularly healthy. They sell themselves as healthy, but there's a lot of calories in a burrito. But anyway, we have from sit down to fast food. We have from healthy to unhealthy. And here's one. I actually got this from kind of an academic paper. This is kind of, again, fashion brands. And we're going from high street to high end. So the ones you see everyday shops to very exclusive properties. And then kind of a little bit about their style. Are they going for a classic style in the past? Are they going for new and exciting and interesting trends? So again, Gucci is very forward-looking and is high-end. Dolce & Gabbana is kind of quite classic style. Burberry is quite classic style. And then new forward-looking, we've got Moschino. And then we have, Topshop. I've seen Topshops in Chicago. They're mainly a British thing, but that's very much you have a Topshop in the UK in every street. And it's almost like, it's a little bit like Zara. It's kind of fashion for teenagers and under 20 and early 20s. And finally, when we've done all this analysis, we may want to do a little bit of a summary with the different sizes of our segments. So Nintendo, we'd look at the different markets, the family market, the occasional gamers, the professional gamers, the teen gamers, etc., etc. We'd look at the market size, how quickly it's going, how many competitors do we have, whether we fit so the family friendly segment we would fit. We might not fit the expert gamers. And then we've got to make a decision as to which segment is a priority. Again, you're not going to make huge strategic decisions on something like this, but it's just a little bit of a way to organize your thoughts. Okay, and then I will stop the video and I'll have a second video on sizing markets.